Hello, everybody. I am beside myself excited and actually in basically a full body sweat because I thought my computer wasn't working, but it is because I get to introduce you to the legendary Tamron Hall and talk about her book, which kept me up the entire weekend. I loved it so much. And so I'm going to just start by just introducing someone who needs no introduction and get us to talking. And then please, please put questions in the chat. I'm happy to ask anything that you guys want to know. And I will try to warn if there's going to be any sort of spoiler because this beautiful book just made its way into the world yesterday. So I'm going to be very careful not to ruin anything. But if anything even seems like it's on the edge of that, I will give a warning. So this is, as I said, someone who needs no introduction, Tamron Hall, the host and executive producer of the nationally syndicated show Tamron Hall. Formerly of the Today Show, she has hosted 6 seasons of Deadline Crime on Investigation Discovery. While at NBC, she was a recipient of the Edward R. Murrow Award for her report on domestic abuse. Tamron currently serves as an advocate for domestic violence awareness, as The Wicked Watch is her first novel, the first in a new series starring Jordan Manning. So for those of you like me who have started, finished, and you're in love, the first thing I'm going to ask, because I'm so excited, is this is one of many that we have to look forward to. Is that true?
Yes, this is, one of, in my mind, my dream. First of all, let me stop to thank you for your time and for your generosity in moderating this conversation. Thank you for being an inspiration on so many levels. And I'm just very, very fortunate to have someone like you shepherding me through this evening of great conversation. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I know there are many things you could be doing tonight. And you did, full disclosure for anyone watching, she was working really hard to get this. She's like, I'm getting this computer together. And just to see that was amazing. That's how committed. And I felt the same way. I just a few minutes ago was doing a tour of a preschool for my son. So I understand that energy of running in and being in this moment. Yes, this is a series I recently thought in my head. Well, my birthday was September 16th. I turned 51. The 3rd season of my show, September 6th premiered, and then October 26th, the debut of this novel. So I said, okay, we're going to make 666 lucky for once. And so I'm thinking 6 would be the goal. I'm about 4 chapters in to the 2nd book, and I'll tell you more about that. But it's been so surreal these past few days promoting the book and hearing from amazing female authors like yourself. Oh, and by the way, that thing you hear, that is not my smoke detector. That is my bird, Jojo, who wants to. I have a bird, Josephine Burker. This is my dining room, and Josephine is on the other side. She wants to be in. So please don't think that I am negligent in changing my smoke detector batteries. That is Jojo, and she can hear me talking, and she's curious who I'm talking to.
She's excited. Well, if I can start by just backing out, you have had a notable career. I mean, so successful, an award-winning talk show host, television reporter, a recipient of some of the hugest honors you can have in journalism. What made you decide to venture into writing a crime series from there?
To be honest with you, it wasn't a deliberate decision, right? It was very organic. I think now that the book is officially out and I'm able to reflect on where I am as a woman, I'm 51, and while I have been very lucky to have achieved certain milestones in my career that I never expected as a kid from Luling, Texas, and and having that spot on the Today Show and losing it and figuring out how to get back up and having this talk show and battling to stay in the game of television. There are things that feel right in my life, and this felt like the right decision. But I wish, Laura, I could take you to a moment where I said, I know, a novel. I had this break in my career for the first time since age 14. I've worked from Toys R Us to selling jewelry where I was paid under the table. It was legal.
Wow.
All kinds of side jobs. And one of my most dreadful jobs was I worked in an office and this woman had us licking the stamps to put on because she didn't like the little wet tab sponge. I just the strangest jobs you can imagine from 14 to 48. And so for the first time I was without a job, and my immediate focus was, getting back to doing what I do, which is reporting and being on air. And then at some point in the conversations with my agent, Bradley Singer, who's become a family friend, I said, I want to write a book. And he said, oh, like a memoir? Like, inspiration because you're so inspirational, or what about, this? And I said, no, I want to write a novel. And he, a novel. And I started to explain that in 1997, there were two cases that I covered that haunted me and still do to this very moment we are speaking. In Texas, the death of a young girl, age 11. And then the same year when I went on in my career to go to Chicago, this great news town, I covered another 11-year-old girl who'd been murdered. And I stood inches from where they went to school, where they played, and where they died. And both of those stories, I now recognize left some form of trauma in my mind and in my heart. And that sounds strange to even say, because at the end of the day, I didn't lose a loved one. Their mothers, their family members, and their friends did. But there was some attachment emotionally to those stories that led me to this character and reconciling some of the emotions, fears, and sadness that reporters don't discuss publicly. And so it was born from this that I said to Bradley, I've got this idea. I jotted it down. He introduced me to my book agent, Eve Adderman. She loved the idea immediately. And I started to feel more confident sharing this character and this story.
Well, because one thing that struck me about the book was it feels to me, and it makes sense because in so many ways, the work you've been doing involves helping shape narratives, helping people come to understand things, helping your audience understand stories that you have access to, people you're talking to, but you feel like such a natural storyteller. Like it's that sort of story that I always say my favorite books are books that I could imagine they're being read out loud to me.
Yeah.
And that's how that feels. So it's so interesting to hear how you came to it, because it almost feels like you've been living with these stories for a long time. That's how the book reads.
That's exactly how I feel about your books as well. There's a feeling of connection and you can hear the voices. And so for me, I recognize this is my first novel, and the structure and the organization and things that skilled writers like yourself have mastered. I'm a baby in this, right? At 51, I'm finally able to say I'm a baby at something. However, I had 30 years of experience that I could bring to this character, both as a participant and as a witness in the newsroom. And then I was able to layer in 6 seasons of Deadline Crime, where again, I found myself in intimate spaces and places with survivors of crime, with detectives who'd solved crime. And largely though, most of those detectives were men, and most of the stories were survivors and victims who were white. And with me, the 2 cases, as I said, one happened to be a white 11-year-old girl, one happened to be a Black 11-year-old girl, but they both were kids.
Yeah.
And they both had friends. And they both, probably right now would be, on their way to college and living their dream. And so for me, that was the connective tissue I said, I'm going to lead with my heart as a writer. I
Mhm.
will grow and I'll learn the mechanics and I'll learn the beat and I'll learn the tone. I'll learn all of that, just as I did as a reporter to get to
Mhm.
where I am. But when I first left Temple University, I landed my first job, not because I had the skill. I went in there like, listen, I got it. I've got, I'm going to get into the community. I'm going to do this. I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to get to know. And I sold the news director on the idea that I wouldn't just be a reporter who came to town and left. That I was going
Yeah.
to be a reporter who got to know. I was going to join a church. I was going to join the Y. I was going to be a part of it. And
Yeah.
so that's what I felt I could bring as a writer to this amazing community of mystery writers was my heart and create this character from that space.
I mean, that really comes through, which brings me to your main character, brings me to Jordan Manning. And my question about her is that for me, well, she joins the ranks of several other uh, fictional sleuths, but she's one of the very few Black female characters in this role that at least that I've read. And was that an important factor for you in starting this series to sort of expand this representation of Black women in crime fiction?
I had no idea that this
Mhm.
was the case, to be honest with you. It never occurred to me. I grew up with the Nancy Drew book set under my bed. So for me, Nancy Drew wasn't white. She was Nancy Drew, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I saw it. And when I went into meetings with Eve and Bradley, um, it was only then that I learned, oh, we've not seen a protagonist like this.
Yeah.
And the team at William R. and HarperCollins said it, and I thought, okay, they're just flattering me. Really? Come on. It's 2021. Are you kidding me? And then I said, well, it wasn't until, I don't know, 20, whatever year I joined the Today Show after 60 years that I was the first Black woman to anchor the Today Show. So might it be possible that this type of character doesn't really exist? And that blew me away, but it also confirmed to me I was on the right track, right?
Yes.
Okay, this is it. There were these little nuggets of the universe saying to me, you're on the right track. Keep picking up the breadcrumbs. And so that was one of the big ones that, okay, this is interesting. And then I said, but I don't want her just to be, oh, she's the Black protagonist, because I'm not, Tamron Hall, the Black host. I hope that I'm Tamron Hall, your friend who's unapologetically Black and Southern, and you can hang out with me any day. As
Yes.
long as you're cool, fun, nice, and that's it. The only prerequisite is that you can perhaps drink 2 mimosas. That's all I ask,
That seems like a perfect prerequisite.
Yeah, right. And so for me, that's what I wanted this character to be. However, I wanted the audience to appreciate that she was a Black female and understand her life and perspective and why Macy James and that case and the cases she learns about in this hotline call, why they matter to her and why the stakes are high enough for her to cross this line of reporter and enter into what she's not even clear of what she's doing when she starts to investigate it.
Well, so one of the things I love so much about her was she's complicated. I mean, she is fun and interesting, but what I love is like almost when you get to see a character get messy, get involved in some way, and think about what you would do differently. I hope I would be as brave as she is. And so that leads me to wonder, in what ways do you feel that you're like Jordan Manning, who I love? And in what ways do you feel like she became something different, not different from you, but I'm not asking for something biographical. I mean more, in what ways is she, does she have similar characteristics to you? And in what ways is she different?
I think at her age, she's far more assertive than I am. I think I have, as someone said to me, I speak with a very strong voice, but my no's are never real no's. Everyone in my family circle, if I say no, and I say it very emphatically, no, and then 3 minutes later, I'm like, okay, fine, what are we doing? And so, but she's a bit more certain of her no's. She's certain of where she stands. And I wasn't at that age. I think people perceived me to be, but I certainly was not. And that's a big difference in us. And that is why she's able to cover this story in a way that I didn't in real life cover those two stories, where I had questions about the news coverage. And I might have in my mind held and gripped the microphone tightly, thinking in my mind, I'm going to blurt out, this is listen, I'm not going back to you. What I'm going to do is this right now. I would have been carried off and never seen again on air.
Yeah.
She doesn't say that, but she takes a stand in ways that I was much more aware of the consequences. And I mean, in our love life, which it was important for me to explore her love life.
Yes.
When life and work collide, when work is 24/7, I wanted the reader to intimately know what is it like to be, on TV, and you have people calling and they want to go out and they're interested in you, and and also being she's liberated her, in her sexuality. She's not trying to be married, and it's okay for her as a young single woman to maybe, I guess back then they called them booty calls, but I wouldn't call it that. No, I wouldn't call it that. But it's okay to have a romantic liaison. And again, other than waiting to exhale, that sexually liberated woman of color was important for me to layer it in. But it's also critical in the world of journalism, where when I first started out in the business, someone said, looked me square in my eye and said, this is a lifestyle. Right.
Wow.
This is not a job. This is a lifestyle. Everything you see when you're at the grocery store, you will see a story idea. When you're here, this is a lifestyle. And when it's a lifestyle, how does that impact your life?
Yes. Yeah, that's so interesting. I really love that, because also I feel like so often in fiction, you see a woman depicted a certain way, almost waiting for Prince Charming, or even the idea she's on this path. And to put someone who is so dynamic and could have any version of, could have decided to be married for or to choose a way of doing it, I think is so important. I think it's so important to have that out there. I do think, and it brings me back to what my next question was, which is, how did your experience, because when you were a crime reporter, including on the Deadline crime series, how did that affect you emotionally? I mean, how did that influence how did that lifestyle influence your life?
It really, especially with Deadline crime, I think because that show was a taped show, and everything else I did was live and kind of in the moment. You'd spend 12 hours or so covering a story, and then you had the live shot as a reporter or on air live. Deadline crime changed me in many ways that I am still trying to fully understand. And here's why. I'm in my dining room right now. We would shoot in small, like, hotel rooms. And I'm in this room for hours talking with a parent who's lost a child or a family member. And it was really the closest that I came to what Jordan does with the character Pamela, the mother of one of the girls who's missing. There's a case that I covered in the San Diego area, and I still to this day hear from the mother of the victim, and we send each other messages from time to time. And that intimacy of Deadline crime really, for a moment, made me not want to cover crime anymore.
Wow.
The emotional impact of it, it was a lot. And I was getting attached to people and keeping relationships with folks that I interviewed and having to check on them. And it wasn't a burden, but I felt it was a responsibility. And here I was trying to start my own family and trying to take care of myself, but then feeling the need in some of these stories and the responsibility not just to walk away, right? Yeah. I just didn't want to say, okay, thank you for the interview, and my team will be in contact with you. I started to hate the goodbyes.
Mm-hmm. Well, in some way, I think I'm really struck by what you're talking about of the small room of it all and the intimacy of it all. It's almost like in some ways there's a therapist role that starts to take place. They're starting to confess to you,
Right.
and then there's a responsibility with that confession that maybe it's hard to navigate after you walk out of that room.
I think it's also many of the people with Deadline Crime knew that my sister was an unsolved murder, right? So they already know I'm in this club.
Yeah.
But also, much like Jordan's character, you are a lifeline. You know, you are an answer. You know, I've had people look me in my eyes so deeply where it's almost as if they're drowning in grief and they want me to pull them out, and I want to pull them out, but then I don't want to let go, right? And so now I'm your surrogate daughter or your best friend because you've lost a best friend. And I felt the need too many times to try to fill that hole. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't fair to them or me. And so for a while, I didn't want to do the show, to be honest with you, not the way I had done it. And I think that's a part of it.
Yeah. Now, is that still Josephine that I hear?
No, that would be the food delivery from my mother.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, Josephine's getting.
This is a real home. Don't let all this pristine china that I splurged on for my 45th birthday fool you. This is a work in progress house, and somebody better get that Budokan.
Me too. But well, I'm looking at, I have so many more questions, and everyone can please jump in. We all got to eat, someone just said. I'm with that. All with that. We have some requests about Josephine. People want to know, Danielle wants to know what kind of bird Josephine is.
Josephine, who might make an appearance in an upcoming series, a book. Josephine is a Senegal parrot who, full disclosure, and I would bring her in other than, she loved me until I had my son. Mm-hmm. And now there's been a great betrayal and a great divide between us. And she's now she loves everyone in the house except for me and baby Moses. I don't know. I don't let her near. I don't know how that battle would end. He has no interest in getting to know her. They have a clear understanding. But Josephine is a Senegal parrot. I've had birds my entire life. In fact, this is funny. We've deviated from the book, but you should get to know me. Everything has birds.
Oh my gosh.
I'm obsessed with birds. Fun fact. And I don't there's a swan gravy ladle over there. And so I've had birds my entire life. I had a bird for 17 years. And then Josephine Birdcrag got right before Moses was born. But she's a Senegal parrot.
Oh, I love it.
And she would bite me if she was in here.
I do see some questions coming up, but I have some more. Can I ask?
Please, yes, please.
Okay. I do want to talk about the city of Chicago, which plays, I would think, for me, setting is such a character that I strive to bring into the book as a character. And I was struck by what you did with Chicago in this book and how Chicago really was in conversation with your characters in this book. Could you talk to me a little about Chicago and why you decided to put it there and why it felt so important to you to address some of the conditions, social, political, economic, that have been going on in that city?
Yeah. Well, first I'll have to tell you, I see a comment that says, I played violin in the Chicago production when you were the voice of God. I was the voice of God in Handel's Messiah. One of the most daunting experiences of my life. I don't know how many shows we did. My son has the playbill in his room right now, and I can't wait to tell him Mom was the voice of God one day in Noah's ark.
You should tell him he should just hold on to that should always be the truth, always the truth.
Well, for me, Chicago, when I was there, I moved to Chicago when I was 27. I left when I was 37. Very formative years of my career. And during that time in Chicago, you had Oprah Winfrey, the most famous Black woman in the world. Michael Jordan, the most famous Black man in the world. And then, not very far from where this case that I reference happened, there was a man who was a community organizer who'd become the most powerful man in the world and the first Black president. And so the dynamic of Chicago is so fascinating from a news perspective, where when you say Chicago, for people who've never been there, they think crime. Oh, I saw that. This person said Chicago's crime. And then inevitably it's the Al Capone comment or the Windy City. You have all of them. And then it's, the Bears. And it's Chicago. I tell my team with my daytime show, every show, I want people to feel a way. I want you to feel something about every show. Like it, love it, whatever it is. I want you to feel a way. And Chicago's the kind of city, whether you've been there or not, you have a feeling about it.
Yep.
There's a reaction to it. Particularly when it comes to crime and police brutality, sadly, when it comes to crime and police brutality. So I felt, from my experience as a first-time writer, again, writing about a place I know intimately, but also how that city, I could have picked Dallas, I could have picked Philadelphia, I lived in both of those cities. But Chicago needed to be the backdrop given what Jordan was discussing and covering. I felt it was the most relevant place. I felt that it was a visual, a mark that the reader would instantly be able to understand how and why Jordan would thrive in this city, and how and why the irony of a city that is seen as a, quote, Black city, a Black girl could be invisible.
Wow. That's powerful. That brings me to another question that I was thinking about, which is there, because you're also a reporter, the crime here, and again, I'm really trying to avoid any spoilers, but is there something that you're hoping that your readers take away from this book in terms of something that you hope might change after reading it? Because I felt, in addition to being very entertained, I felt quite moved by the book, which doesn't always happen when you're reading crime fiction. I think you really accomplished that.
Thank you. I think for me, keep in mind, when I was writing this, George Floyd had happened, but so had Brianna Taylor.
Yeah.
And far more people know the assassination of George Floyd than the assassination of Breonna Taylor. And in many ways, obviously, I don't want to compare what would be more terrifying, but I will say she was asleep in her bed, right? The safest place. When we walk out of our homes, there's some part of us, I'm sure we assume, oh boy, a car. I mean, I live in busy New York City. These days, a bicyclist, anything. That safety is not guaranteed outside of your home. That.
Yep.
Inside of your home, it should be, right? And for me at the time, on my talk show, covering Breonna Taylor in a different way than I would have if I were in a newsroom or on MSNBC, it was again a reminder of the absence of true empathy when it comes to Black women. And particularly that case where insert, I think, any other race outside of a woman of color, and I mean Black, brown, Latino, Asian, people would have been, you would have known her name, and we do know her name, but not to the degree we should. She was asleep in her home. Yeah. A warrant was executed for the wrong person, and an EMT worker. I mean, she couldn't have had a better background.
I mean, that's the thing. And
so that's a little bit of what I think, feeling when I touched upon some of the background of the young woman in the story. Also, my own sister. People have asked me why I don't talk a lot about her case. My sister had her own personal struggles, and I did not want some reporter to do a story and then but this was the other side of her life. She actually had, this issue when she was 22, and then somebody said this and it, because none of it was relevant to what happened to her, not one bit of it. But you feel that fear that when the victim does not fit a certain profile, all of those other things become relevant. And so I think for this book, it's a fictional, this is fictionalized. But it is rooted in reality,
Yeah.
right? And so I don't want to cross any lines, and I don't want to compare the story to real life, but it is truly inspired deeply by true stories. And at any moment, and look at where we are,
Yep.
it becomes real. And
Yeah.
I could never have imagined that this conversation would happen at a time where the book is out and we're back at this crossroads again of who gets to be the lead, who gets to be the victim, and who do we see as ourselves.
It's so interesting when you say that, because the idea that you have to be um, a worthy victim, even if or like that you have, because it does, even with, you think of Breonna Taylor in EMT, had done all these things in her life. It was her apartment, even like it was that, it's insane. But then you ask the questions, well, what if that wasn't the case? She still should be safe in her apartment. And what we do to people in the moment of grief, when we demand, well, they are also supposed to be perfect in that way.
Yeah.
I think that that's so interesting. I wanted to ask you about your writing process, because how did that look? Did you write in the morning? Did you write in the evening? Do you like writing? Do you like having written?
Oh,
How do you feel
I
about it?
I love it. I've been for 25 years of my career in morning TV. So it's natural for me to wake up at dark 30, as I refer. Anything before 4 a.m. is dark 30.
I
Um,
love that. I
that's my
love that.
natural wake up time. I tell people, if you want me to wake up at 9 a.m., you give me the day, because I
Yeah.
cannot wake up at 9. I'd rather sleep the whole day away. I so we at the time had our production shut down. We were now in my home, and the show was being taped from my home. We were supposed to wrap this season up first week in June. We extended it June 21st because the audience had responded to my journalism background, and we'd shifted the daytime show to focus much more on that and cover stories related to COVID and where the world was. And so I started to write, not a true outline, but I had a concept, right? I had a concept of what I wanted from this character. As I said, I wanted her to, in some ways, be a superhero. I mean, this forensic background and being a journalist. But I said, I remember saying to someone, we believe a guy from Krypton worked at the Daily Planet, wrote
Yeah.
news stories, went inside of a booth, took off his jacket, but we can't believe a Black woman was a forensic scientist and a journalist. Okay. Well, again, and that was my first nudge, okay, we're going to do this, Jordan. We're going to shake it up, right? And I would use my iPhone, and I don't sleep well, and I'm sure that's another whole issue that I should talk about with someone. But I usually, my night crawlers seep in around 1 a.m., 2 a.m. So I have an idea in my head, speak it into my voice memo, get up at 5 a.m. and flesh it out. Sean Taylor was there for me to help me organize some of these thoughts, because I'm writing scripts for my show, and then I'm writing this. And so I'm clicking away with my producers for my show, and I try to be present and read everything and all of the authors that come on, because I want somebody to read my book if they're interviewing me. So, I give myself fully to that. So my days of creativity were Saturday and Sunday, mostly the whole day, starting out in the morning and continuing on. And now we have a rhythm of, with this second book, Wednesdays, because I tape only one show on Wednesdays. And I would like my Saturdays back. So since I don't tape on Fridays, we have commit the entire Friday. But as as ideas and concepts and conversations pop into my head, I speak them into the voice memo. I send them to her. She, jots it down, and we just kind of flesh it out that way. But it wasn't a difficult process, because I talk for a living. So I was basically talking to myself. Growing up, I had the nickname Not Necessarily, And imagine dealing with a 7-year-old that you're constantly hearing, not necessarily. And I was an only child for many years in the home, and I played Monopoly by myself and chess. And so I've always had this vivid imagination. I've always had this ability to create and talk in my head. Now, the nuns who, were my teachers did not always appreciate my very vivid imagination. And that proved to be a challenge for my mother. But it now has allowed for me to tap into that kid who really, I'll tell you, I've never shared this story. So my mother married the dad I was meant to have. My stepfather raised me. And I remember, and this is one of my deepest secrets I will share with everyone today, when there was this period of time my mom was a single mom and raising me, and I did not have a relationship with my biological father. And I literally would create stories of our meeting and hanging out and him coming to see me. And I would fantasize that we were at a grocery store and there he was. I'm like, hi, how are you? And wanting that relationship. One of the first works of fiction was a fantasized relationship. I've never told anyone this story. A fantasized relationship with my biological father. And that was my first, I guess, little novel.
Wow. That's amazing. That's an incredibly powerful way to start writing.
That's how it started. And it was this girl and her dad, and me fantasizing what that must be like for this kid. And it was me. And so I think I created this character much like that. And just from this place of innocence, even at my age and my experience, I approached it with a spirit of innocence and not knowing. And so that's why the writing process, I know, listen, number 2 will probably, I'm going to writer's block and all the things that normally come with creating. But this one moment in time, if you will, that I used to create this, it was very much in the space of that childhood novel that I created.
Well, I was just about to say it's just so touching. Thank you for sharing that. And someone else just said, thank you for sharing that. Very moving. You mentioned now with the new book, Wednesdays and Fridays are the day.
Right.
Someone asked in the chat, can you tell us what is happening in this next book?
Well, already, of course, as Jordan is trying to figure out her career. She's now had some success and is tempted by the lure of being the anchor. Not every reporter. There are many reporters who are quite happy being reported, but the natural thing for a reporter at some point is to wonder, do they want to be in the anchor chair, even if it's just for the check, because that's where the check is. But what do you want to do? So she's like, now, do I want to be there for the check, or do I want to be in the world still? Because you do lose a bit of yourself when you when you decide I'm going to be the anchor. You're not assigned to the streets anymore. And she loves being in the streets. And so now I can reveal that she it's brought to her attention this disappearance of a woman who happens to be a mom, who happens to be white. And Jordan is not a mom and she's not white. And will she have the same attachment to this case as she did with Macy James? She could see herself in Macy James. She could see that experience. She has in some part of her life been that kid. But what I wanted to tap into, honestly, Laura, was this notion of womanhood and motherhood, right? I've been a woman for 51 years. I've been a mom for 2. And so often, when I first had my son, I would have friends say, welcome to the club. And I'd say, well, I don't want to be in the club. I just want to be Tamron. You, and I don't want to talk about this kid all the time. Now, don't get me wrong, he is cute, and here's the pictures. But, I still want us to have our girlfriend vibe. Yeah. And when we conflate womanhood with motherhood, how many do we leave behind, right? Yeah. And so I wanted to explore that part of Jordan's life. And would she be able to turn to the mirror and judge herself in the way she's judged other reporters for not caring about Macy. You know, you don't care about her. You're not Black, you know, and now she's not a mom. She's not, you know, white. Does she understand? Now, for me in my career, I've been fortunate to have people connect with me from all walks of life. You know, my mother lives in the reddest part of the reddest state. And when I go home, there are people who've never seen me, wait for it, on MSNBC. I wonder why. They didn't know I was on MSNBC. But
that's not their channel.
Right. They're like, what is that channel? It's like, put the cross. But they know me from Deadline Crime.
Yeah.
Or the time I was out with Bear Grylls in the wild. And so they know me for those things. And so I've been fortunate to be, you know, in Harlem and people go, girl, go get them. Don't let NBC fire you. You got this. And then be in the reddest part of my state or in some small town in Arkansas. And then you hear this unmistakable Southern drawl of Tamra. And you turn around and you're like, now who would have thunk that? Yeah. Look at you, you know, and there they are hugging me with a Confederate flag shirt on. I'm like, okay, we're in, you know, we're in. We're doing it. I respect whatever you got going on. Yeah. So I've been fortunate to have that wide range at this point in my career. Jordan hasn't had that exposure yet, right? She hasn't felt what I have felt, which is a connection from people from all walks of life. She's been a beat reporter, mostly assigned to stories where she's on the south side of Chicago, and now she's exploring. Obviously she cares, but does she have connection? And those are two different things. Caring and connection are two different things. And so I'm trying to dig into that.
Oh, I love that. That's so interesting. Caring, connection they're so different. I wouldn't have thought about it that way. That's really, really interesting. Someone has a question, which was, what was an experience you had where you learned words and language have power? And the second part of that would be, did that experience help shape your writing?
Yes, I think, you know, that was something I recognized very early on in my life with labels, right? Being an underdog and being the daughter of a single mom, you know, I recognize that words can destroy and they can make you feel less than. Yeah, I even remember when I was a kid getting in the gifted and talented program. That changed. Gifted and talented, right? It's like, wait a minute, you can't tell me nothing, right? And so whatever gifted and talented meant back then, I just remember my mom got me a test, and the next thing I know, I'm in the gifted and talented program. And
was that before or after? Not necessarily.
That was when they were trying to figure out how to deal with this child. And someone said, she can't be quiet. And Miss Hall, she talks a lot and she's really a handful. And my mother said, I remember I got a report card and you know, back then the nuns would label talks at inappropriate times. It was like, check. And that was like my thing. And I always came home with a report card that said talks at inappropriate times. Yeah. And my mother tried to figure out clearly what to do with me and said, well, let's test her. Maybe, you know, she needs to be challenged more. And as a result, I ended up in the gifted and talented program, a label, words that matter. So I think I learned that very early in my life. And how it's impacted my career and even this novel, trying as best I can to make sure that the words are not there to fill the air. And it's hard to do that. I mean, in TV, dead air, you're like, wait. And having the power to control yourself and know when to use the word or words.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay. I'm going to just look here and see. And if not, I'm going back to my questions. I have 3 pages left and it's 7:47. You're done. I hope you all are getting comfortable. If anyone else has a question, put it in the chat. Otherwise, I'm just gonna keep going. Okay. This is another one I had to ask you. I'm just going to find out where I left this. Okay. I want to go back into the story in 2 different ways. Um, I want to talk to you about research,
Mhm.
how you approach research and how you think about it differently, because so much of one hat that you wear involves research,
Yes.
reporting. But the research in this book, everything felt the forensic research, all of it. I mean, I would think that that was what you do for a living. It was so detailed. So how did you do that?
Well,
How did
for me,
you?
a lot of that also goes back to my Deadline crime days because,
Yes.
with Deadline crime, I did spend a lot of time with different specialists. I remember being in Florida, and there was a case where a woman was murdered and the car was burned, and I interviewed the investigator on the side of the road where she stood, and a tiny napkin caught her eye
Wow.
in the burned out debris. And she explained to me what that felt like to look over. He's like, "What is that?" And instantly knew on the side of the road that it meant something. And I mean, you're like, whoa, like I probably, any of the rest of us would have been so focused on the charred out car,
Yeah.
right? And it had DNA on it, and it led to the arrest of the person responsible.
Wow.
So for me, I looked over old notes from stories. I keep a lot of my old notes, especially cases that are just stunning like that. Um, we did a lot of research on old crimes, like the traditional ones,
Mhm.
particularly with serial killers.
Mhm.
Um, the Atlanta child murders still remains one of the most fascinating cases to me, and dug in a lot on some of the information there. I, with Sean, called different friends and different sources that we used in the past. Sean
Mhm.
worked on the crime beat as the scanner traffic, person, and we called in and ask a lot of folks that we'd work with, not on air,
Mhm.
retired detectives. There's a retired detective that I adore out of Florida, that actually tipped me off on one of the an unforgettable Deadline crime. Called him, and I didn't have to search. I didn't have to Google search investigators. I knew enough of them to call and work with them. I think some of my most surprising research came with technology, because
Mhm.
this is 1997. And I'm like, wait a minute, did the iPhone do that back then? Or
Yeah.
because you think of the iPhone now, like you believe it existed like this since it came out, and it didn't.
Yeah.
Um, and technology did, and even down to, I remember 2008, I moved here. The big headline was Obama didn't want to get rid of his BlackBerry. Like,
Yeah.
remember that? Like, oh my God, he's
I
got to get
do
rid of
remember
the
that.
BlackBerry. If he can't get rid of the BlackBerry, he can't be president. I mean, that's how. And now I don't know anyone who has a BlackBerry, right? So
Yeah.
I think they just re-brought it back or whatever, but reintroduced it. So it was more about technology and what was happening, but the beats of reporting what she does, thankfully, I know very well.
Yeah.
And I probably, if I picked a different occupation for her, this book wouldn't be here, and it would have taken much longer to write. But again, being new to this space and knowing what I know, I tell my team all the time, even now. Um, I know what I know, and I'm
Yep.
very comfortable with what I don't know, right? And that's why I've been able to hopefully grow in the things that I've taken on. I
Mhm.
will speak with great confidence only about what I know, and
Mhm.
this is what I know. I know Jordan's life. I know Jordan's world, and that's why I chose this as my first novel.
And it sounds like you have a little bit of the midnight disease, which, speaking of being gifted and talented, it's a sign that if you wake up at that time,
Really?
it's a sign of having like some mental gifts. Because I guess that I read somewhere there's something, there's like a lobe back here, something that doesn't quite shut off if your brain is always, so you can
Ah,
just tell yourself that the next time you wake up. But
I love.
do you read a lot? Do you have time to read a lot? And what
I
have you been like? Were there books that were helpful to you when you were writing this? And
I love the character Easy Rollins. I love Walter
mm,
Mosley. I like that sexiness, that private detective, that kind of thing always resonated with me a lot. Honestly, I read so much for the show that I tend to absorb the research information like a reporter across the board. I read a recipe like a reporter. And
Yeah.
so
Oh,
okay, let me investigate. That doesn't make sense. So for me, one of the things I tried to be mindful of, I didn't want to copy, right? I didn't want to say, oh, I'm such a fan of Laura's and I'm going to copy everything she does. Just as I did not approach my talk show that way. Of course, who doesn't adore Oprah? But I didn't say, and hello, I'm Oprah. I couldn't do that. I didn't want to imitate.
yeah.
Because if you imitate, you don't learn. And
Oh, I
I
love
feel
that.
that
That I need to write down. I love that. I love that. Sorry, go on. I have to
no,
like put that in my
right.
memory.
So I try to really push down natural influences
Yes.
so that I could try to deliver this novel in its truest form of my creativity.
Mhm.
And then that will allow me to grow.
Yeah. I think writers fall into two categories. I really fall into your category here, which is when I'm working on something, I can't read anything at all in that genre. So if I'm working on something like a thriller, that means I'm reading memoirs that have nothing to, about 18th century flowers or whatever, something so far removed. And then there are other people, but I never thought about it that way. But I love the idea that you just said, imitation does not allow growth, like to really sort of move in that.
I think it's true. So for me, most of the reading while creating this book really was Llama Llama Red Pajama, Blue Moon, Mickey Loves His Friends. What was the other? That's where we live, in Elmo's Playland. And it was good to have that contrast and good to have that, right, this is easy. Right now I'm deeply in the throes of the book, How to Potty Train in 3 Nights or whatever it is.
Oh, wow.
So that's been great for me in the second series. And so that's, it also keeps me balanced. One of the things with Jordan, without giving too much away, she has a ritual that she needs to perform after the day is done. I have a ritual that I perform very different. Hers is at the end. Mine was at the beginning before I covered a story. What did I do to armor up and to prepare myself to discuss this crime with family members and also to honor the person who died? And so these rituals, and many reporters do have rituals, right? After deadline crime, I would sometimes go to, there's a steakhouse here, and I would get this huge steak, and I would get the mashed potatoes, and I'd get their Brussels sprouts, and I'd get the biggest glass of like Cabernet, like the heaviest red wine that you could imagine. And I needed to indulge in that way because it was comforting. It was like, it was just, and I still don't fully have the words to describe what it did for me, but it was a ritual, and the potatoes were so creamy. And it's almost as if this meal tastes so different than any other that I had prior to. And it was giving my body this incredible rich comfort that I needed after witnessing and talking about such trauma. It was the ultimate indulgence. I deserve.
Oh, I love that. I want to point everyone also to the side where you can see a link to buy this fabulous book. I imagine a lot of you haven't read it yet because it just came out yesterday.
Do you know I haven't had a chance to even see the book? I haven't had that moment where the author goes into the bookstore and sees there, but my husband has. My husband sent me a photo yesterday. I've been on set all day yesterday and all day today. And so I hadn't had a chance to. There was a bookstore on the way home, but I wanted to make sure I was here with you on time. I was like, I'm not going to be late for Laura. And so I didn't get a chance to go. So tomorrow, hopefully I'll be able to get a chance to go by a bookstore and do that picture of myself in. But I've not seen the book, and I have them here, but I've not seen it in real life in a store. So it's just crazy. And I've been signing, and it's such a pleasure to sign these books. And I'll tell you, because you don't know if you'll have the opportunity again, right? This is the first novel, could be your last. And when I was signing the books, and there are thousands of books, I tried to stay so present with each signature, recognizing that someone was going to take that book, they were going to hold that book, it would be on the side of their bed, it might even be on the bookshelf to read a little bit later for the vacation you're planning in December or whatever. And I fantasized, going back to even my childhood, what it was like for that person to get that book and open it and see my signature. So I tried to never fall into the, which is okay. I mean, you got a lot of things going on in your life. But for me, because this was my first opportunity to sign my novel or a novel with my name in it, it was really special. And I thought very deeply about the people who would take their money and, you know, buy the book and open it because it's signed by me.
I love that so much. And I just want to end by saying two things that I see in the comments here, which is someone else echoing, Georgina's echoing what I said. It is really good. Looking forward to the next Jordan Manning book. I will say that I am going to be bothering you, hopefully, for an early copy of the new one.
Oh, I need your, now I'm like, listen, the sea legs, I gotta get going here.
I can't wait. I can't wait. And everyone, I will just say, like, I loved this book. I started it on Saturday. I was done on Monday. Like, it is a page turner. Go in the side here, support Warwick, support Tamron. This book will not disappoint you. You'll be done. You'll be up all night like Tamron because you won't be able to put it down. But it's
Thank
wonderful.
You. Thank you. I just appreciate your support. I appreciate all of the independent booksellers, the bookstores owned by women, all of these things. This experience, had I not taken this leap of faith, I wouldn't have an opportunity right now to talk to you. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to thank, you know, small booksellers and independent booksellers who are out there still hustling and still doing their thing and still believing in someone walking into the store and opening it and feeling the book, all of those things. So I am so grateful. Thank you for everyone in the comments. Jojo, clearly the bird has gone to sleep. So I think that means it's a wrap. When the Senegal parrot shuts down, that's when you know the night's over.
Well, congratulations. I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited for all of us that this is the first of many that we're going to get to read of Jordan Manning. So
my only thing that I hope to change is the next time we'll be in person.
Yes, me too. Me too.
Thank you.